It's still Labor Day. It's just really hot outside. And we're bored. And I need something to keep me busy. Which, yeah, I could be cleaning the house or something like that. But that's never near as fun as playing with your Shiney Rocks. And I'm real undecisive as to what I want to call this video yet. But I had been wanting to shoot a video, an in-house video, about creek arrowheads. The ones that I find and others around me locally. I mean, our creeks, if you've watched my videos, are just full of gravel. That's why I call them the big sea of gravel. Because you get on gravel bars that are like the size of football fields, or bigger even. And it literally is a big sea of gravel. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and actually 5 piles of arrowheads here. And you know, I always love watching everybody else's videos, because me personally, I love all arrowheads. Come on, focus, work with me now. But it really takes a certain appreciation for the arrowheads that come out of our creeks. Like this arrowhead right here. This is a Dixon. It has a Rocky Creek arrowhead tip on it. You know, the shoulder's been knocked off on this side over here, and the edges kind of beat up a little bit, but this was my first full arrowhead from the creek. And I'll never forget that day when I spotted this guy. I was jumping up and down and had to call my good buddy Terry, who many of you have seen on my videos for years, and tell him I just found my first full creek arrowhead. It's like this point here. This is my first Etley out of the creek. And because of the material it's made out of, she's kind of rough. Been rolled around a while. Missing the tip. But this was my first Etley out of the creek. So, like this pile right here comes out of my favorite creek case, I call it. Like this little apple creek here. It's just missing a little bit off that ear. Maybe missing a little bit there, but definitely had longer ears, I believe. And a little bit of tip missing. I just love that little bullseye pattern in it. And actually quite thin. It just amazes me how some of these survive the creek. It really does. I'm going to have to hurry along or we won't get to see them all. But a lot of guys, I'd said in a recent video, won't even hunt these creeks around here. Because the gravel bars are too big, too hard to hunt, too much gravel to look at. And then 90-some% of what you find, so they say, been rolled, and just beat to heck. They're beat up. They're not as good as a dirt arrowhead. Always love this little coop right here. I don't know if the lighting will let it show, but do you see where that little impact breaker is on the tip? And that was actually caused from the creek, and because it has that orange patina from being in the creek for a while. But right there, that dude was pink, all the way pink once upon a time. Here's one of my favorite, well, I don't have favorites, they're all favorites. But this is a rice lobe, and I'll never forget the day I found this. Me and my buddy Terry walking in the creek and pulling our kayaks in a spot where you couldn't paddle through, and this guy laid right in my path. And that was a great find. It was meant for me to find it, nobody else, because if it would have laid there much longer, it'd have been gone from another flood. Nobody would have ever seen it. Like this little blended rice lobe here. Some great material. Some excellent flaking. Hopefully these videos and this lighting is doing these justice. It's like this arrowhead here. I'd mentioned this friend before when I'd found this point here this summer. But we had been out hunting in the creek, one of my favorite spots, and I had already found a point. And to tell you the truth, I don't remember what that first point was. But this one gravel bar was like half covered with gravel and then half sand, and we had about walked it out, and I'm like, I'll walk in the sand and you walk in that part of the gravel. And I'm like, you need to find something. And I was juking out rocks out of the sand with my juking stick and just flicking rocks out. You know, I'd see something, you know, about that much of it showing or something like that. I don't think I seen but a thumbnail size of this rock showing, and hit it with my stick, and it just boom, flipped out of the sand all like that. And I looked at my buddy and he's like, I seen that. He's like, I can't believe you did that. And it's a pretty rough Etley compared to ones I have out of the dirt, but it's one of those moments that you love so much it just stays etched with you forever. There's a little apple creek here. I love this point, but this came from another one of them creek day hunts that I remember so well. I'd maybe found a couple broken things that day, but this was the only full one I found, and I found it in the water where I have found so many of them. I'm like, I know there's an arrowhead there. I know there is. I know there is. And I went up there, and there it was. And I guess a little banded Adena point here. I had been way down the creek that day, hunting all over. Maybe a couple broken arrowheads in the pocket. Walking along, and I stop. And I'm thinking, man, I know there's a full arrowhead out here. And I look down, and I see this much tip sticking out of the rock and sand. Right in between my feet, basically. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And we pull her out, and I'm like, oh, score. And that was an awesome day. Like this here. I used to call this one here one of my finer creek arrowheads. Because it really doesn't have much roll damage to it. A little bit on the blade edge there. But just some exquisite flaking. And this is a Hennessy point. A point that's really not a common point to Missouri. That's just one of those things that tell you that they traveled a lot. Like this little Kramer here. You know, most guys bring points like these home and put them in a bucket. Shame on them. I said these are out of my favorite creek arrowheads, and those of you who've been watching me a long time might remember the hidey hole video. That was quite a few years back, maybe even 4. I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, but it's been a while. Went to a spot that's way away from the house, close to where my ex-doctor used to be at, and this point was there, waiting for me. And it's a rice lobe. See the opposite rhomboid bevels. And here's a cool little Adena point. And I don't have a lot of what they consider a beaver tail Adena, which has your round base at the bottom. And that has all the banding going across it there. I mean, you find points that have bands of material in them, but usually not all the way through it. I bet shows that good. I know the lighting is definitely showing the flaking really good on these points, because I can see that in the camera. Like this point here. I remember when I found this point very well. And it was about the time I was really starting to get good, or better, I should say. We're never really good. We're all amateur archaeologists. I don't care if you've been doing it for 50 years and you went to school for it. Nobody knows everything. But there are those that know more. But a friend of mine, and he's pretty dang good at it, said this was a McCorkle. And that's not a typical Missouri point. I just love the material in this point. Oh, let's see. Here's like my only Jack's Reef point. And I'll never forget the day I found this. Never forget that day. I'll get a little Etley here. And this here for a creek Etley is really probably one of my nicer ones. And I may forgot what I did last week, but I remember exactly the gravel bar, exactly where I found this one at. I remember that moment so well. About like this big Etley here. And just because it doesn't have a perfect little dirt tip, is that big fresh nick out of the blade there. Like I said, most guys would bring this home and put it in a bucket, or they wouldn't even go out there after it. This was my first 4-inch point. And it come from the creek. And I had hunted the dirt and dug in the dirt quite a bit And I'd never found a 4-inch arrowhead. And I'll never forget the day I spotted this thing. It was out in the water out in front of a gravel bar where I found several 4-inch points. Just laying there shining like a diamond. I could see it from a long, long distance. And this is kind of a special point to me. This was my first good arrowhead out of the creek for 2016. I hadn't decided on going back to filming yet. And it's a rice shallow side notch point. Great color, great flaking on it. Just love it. And then here, and I've had some guys wanted to call it other things, but I know it's not no Apple Creek. Apple Creek ears don't get made that wide. Don't have that really strong basal thinning in them like this one does. That's a blended point. You can actually see that little hinge right there. That was where the impact brake took it off. And then they worked that edge just a little bit. If it'll macro in and focus there. Enough to keep using it. And then, since it's blunted, my only full Calf Creek. I mean, check out the basal thing in that point. And you can weigh in on that creek, Dalton, if you don't think it is a Calf Creek or if you think it's something else. I mean, like I said, I'm not perfect. I'm always open to opinions. Now, let's move up here to this pile real quick. This is my first rice lobe out of the creek. And it has the tip gum with the impact brake that comes down. Oh, yep, right there where it is. You can see that little flat spot. Impact brake took the side and that part of the edge of the blade off. Really awesome early archaic point. Great big old Smith. And it's missing some base and the ear knocked off and everything. But check it out. It's all colored up, patinaed. But I don't know if you'll be able to see the color difference right there. You can tell this was a pink point. And a great big pink dude. Got patinaed that different color. Because that's what being in the creek does. And this is a cool little side notch point. You know, it's got a little base knocked off, a little tip there, but still a great point. This was my very first Sedalia. And I spotted it from a long distance. And it was actually standing up on its edge like that, out in the rocks. Great find. And this point, I'll never forget the day I found this one. It was another one of them points. I'd been out in the creek hunting. Went to a shady spot on the gravel bar. Turned around, sat my bag down, because I was going to sit on this log right where I sat my bag at. You can see that much tip sticking out. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Pulled it up out of there. Was hooping and hollering. And in this point, I just brought this up with the little white wolf dude. This is a Melville point, Smith point, but you see how it's all patinaed, all that orange there. On this side, no telling how long this fell out of the bank, fell off into the creek, got all patinaed up for 1,000, 2,000 years, who knows. And a later Indian found it, picked it up, and resharpened it up, renapped it. That's why all the patina's gone in them places. And that's one of the only points I have like that. That's why it goes in our main creek case. Oh boy, we got to hurry. And down here, we have our points that come from our transitional case. Like this one here. See that little flat spot? This was a much longer point. Had a great big old impact break on it, and I sharpened it down. Put a new tip on it, but I guess I couldn't do anything with that edge, or they acquired what they wanted right there with that tip. Didn't need to redo that whole edge, because that was the part they were looking for. The penetration end. And one of my favorite Daltons right here. It has a chisel-made tip on it. It was probably broke off by them using it. Missing a tip, but those of you who've been watching a long time, remember if it's me seeing this from the kayak. And I spotted it booking through the creek, going back to the truck. And I was like, oh, what's that? And this was in a pumpkin seed perch bed. He'd cleaned all the rocks around there, and this was right on the edge. I mean, how many times is that going to happen in a guy's lifetime? The paleo art Dalton, we call it, because of the little design on there. And like a lot of Daltons, a lot of them get beat up. You know, this is missing an ear, missing a tip. See, impact break on it. Now it's possibly caused by the creek. But it's a Dalton. It's not half a Dalton. It's an almost whole Dalton. So we love it. Like this point here. A lot of you been watching me a long time, and it's translucent from here to there. As you can see, the original quartz looking material right there. My only agate basin, and we know that by the flaking on it. There's a beveled edge on this side and beveled edge on this side. Examine the rest of that flaking just right, because not all arrowheads get made textbook classic. You know, them kids had to start out somewhere and practice for years. Even if everyone else in the camp was so perfect at making them, you know, your older elders. And that's where a lot of the real appreciation comes in. Appreciating the lifestyle that the Native American had to live with for a long, long time, and used the stone. That was their daily survival. Their daily survival. I think that first round was 23 minutes, so sorry, it's a long video, but I guess this one will be for the true followers and those who really like the Shiney Rock. Which a lot of guys call them arrowheads, spear points. That's their most common names, but as you've heard me say before, and people that know me quite well on here, look at the flaking on that. Can you guess what this point is? Know that I don't like to be like everybody else, and I'm an eccentric type person. That's just my personality. Besides having OCD, bipolar, and all other kinds of mental craziness. My only Scott's Bluff. Right there. And because of the tip being gone, dings in it there, dings down the blade, that guys, just bring it home, put it in a bucket. Nope, it goes in our transitional case. Now this one here, we do have some purple points. That one rice lobe we showed you, that has a great purple color to it there, but this one's a real dark purple. With some bands of pink running through it. And this is a Johnson point, which I always call the down step of a Dalton, because they came right after the Dalton era, which your Daltons were 10 to 12,000 years old, and your Johnson's about 9,000 years old. Still some very exquisite archaic flaking. And then here we have a Holland Dalton. Check out the flaking on this dude. It has a piece of outer core left right there. It ain't broke. It's outer core. The outside of the rock. And then boom. Look at that. I believe this was a much longer point, like probably a 4-inch point, like this Dalton, and sharpened down, and sharpened down, and sharpened down. And asked if it was a fluted Holland Dalton. I guess we'll never know. But look at this flake scar here. And it runs in a dang U-shape. I mean, from one end to the other. There's no hinge stop in there. I mean, I have no idea how that napper ever did that. He was a one fine napper. Some exquisite oblique transverse flaking on it. Then we have some new finds from this year. A new Dalton. Now, this side, this is what they would call a fluted Dalton, compared to like this Dalton here. This Dalton ain't fluted. This Dalton here ain't fluted, though it does have thinning strikes in the base. But this side here has that one big flute in it. This side has 3 different thinning strikes in it. But I was told by some old timers, that still makes it a fluted Dalton, they said. And then here, now let's do this one first. This was the one where I went round and round. And it had its ear possibly sharpened off. But it always amazes me when I find these little bitty guys in the creek like this. Which it's not much smaller than this Dalton, actually. They're pretty close to the same size. And then you see me find this rice this year. I don't know if you've seen how the tip glows like that, though. And like with a few other points, this is probably one of my finer finds out of the creek for our big rocky creeks. Not rolled and beat to death, but it had been a creek for a while. About like that pink point we were just showing. Not very many flaws in it either. So you really have to appreciate what those who come before us, what they did. Because when it comes to a lot of your creek arrowheads, and this was actually my first creek arrowhead this year. Nadina point. Big part of the base knocked off. A lot of them. This is what you find. Big Etley. Been rolled and beat to death, but I still love it. You know, or like his Dixon. I really don't necessarily know if it was a drill. I think just a real sharpened up skinny point. Like this rice lobe here. Shame it was really had that little bit of base missing. That ear being gone wouldn't bothered me at all. But I wish the rest of the base would have been there. Some strong bevels. You know, a lot of them that we find are like this. And I've gave a lot of these kind of points away. A lot of them we find are like this. You know, if you want a couple arrowheads like this, just mention it. And we'll see if I can, or if you can send me a message with your address, or I'll send you a message. It's really hard for me to do over the phone. It's a lot easier. Like this point here. I've been studying it for quite some time, and just because of the flaking on it, not necessarily the ears, because it would have had more ears stick off there, more ears stuck off there, but being ground in that part of the base, plus being ground on the inside of the ear, and then it's flaking. All it's flaking. So much transverse oblique flaking. I believe it's a hemp hill. Well, I hope you enjoyed our little border on the house arrowhead selection. Now I gotta put all these away. Back in the case. You know, these ain't quite made it to the case yet. And thanks for watching this really long video. I hope you enjoyed it. Because it's not always just about the shiny rock, but it's about those who made the shiny rock. The lifestyle they led. And they depended on the stone so much. But this is the only thing that they left behind. Because that's just how it works out in the world. Unless you're made of stone, you will not last forever. Thank you all for coming along. Though, as human beings, we depart in a part of energy to another plane of life. Best wishes to y'all.